Most men completely waste the hug. And I don't mean that in some weird way. I mean, the hug happens, it ends, and then they do exactly the thing that makes her forget them within the hour. Think about the last time a woman hugged you. Maybe it was a greeting. Maybe it was a goodbye. Maybe it was one of those moments where you weren't even sure what it meant. You just knew something was there, some kind of energy. And then, what did you do? Most men either hold on a second too long or pull away too fast. They laugh nervously, or they say something completely unnecessary like, "Okay, so," and just kill whatever was building. She felt something in that moment. Maybe not love, maybe not fireworks, but something. A little warmth, a small pull, and then it just dissolved. Because of what happened in the 5 seconds after. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Not pickup lines, not games, not some list of tricks to memorize. We're going to talk about the moments women actually remember. The small, specific things that stick in her mind hours later when she's doing something completely unrelated and suddenly she's thinking about you. Not because you were loud or impressive, but because of something much quieter than that. There's one part of this, we'll get to it toward the end, that most men genuinely never think about. And it has nothing to do with what you say. It's about what you don't do. And once you see it, you'll notice it everywhere. But let's start from the beginning. Here's something worth understanding about how attraction actually works in a woman's mind. It's not about the big moments. It's really not. Women don't sit around replaying the time a guy showed up with flowers or said something smooth at a bar. Those things fade fast. What stays, what actually lingers, are the moments that felt different from what she expected. The brain, her brain, your brain, everyone's brain, pays attention to the unexpected. Not shocking, not dramatic, just slightly off from the pattern. A small surprise, a quiet moment that didn't go the way it usually goes. Most men are completely predictable after physical contact, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's just how it is. There's a kind of anxiety that kicks in the moment touch happens, even something as simple as a hug, and it pushes men to fill the space, to talk, to joke, to do something that makes them feel less exposed. And she notices that. Not consciously always, but somewhere underneath, she registers it. He got nervous. He needed to cover it up. And the feeling that was building, it gets covered up too. What women are actually drawn to, and this is something that sounds simple but runs pretty deep, is a man who doesn't need to manage the moment, who can let something land, who doesn't immediately reach for a joke or a word or a next thing to do. There's a psychological concept called emotional regulation. It basically means your ability to sit inside a feeling without immediately reacting to it. And it turns out, men who have that quality, even just a little bit of it, are experienced very differently by women than men who don't. Not because it's some strategy, but because it's rare. Think about it from her side. She's used to men who get awkward, or overcorrect, or push too hard, or disappear entirely. When someone just stays calm, stays present, doesn't make it weird but doesn't pretend nothing happened either, that creates something, a small imprint. And that imprint is what we're actually talking about here. It's not about being mysterious for the sake of it. It's not about playing it cool like you don't care. It's something more specific than that. It's about understanding what she's actually feeling in those small moments and responding in a way that matches it instead of accidentally canceling it out. That's what the next part is about. Let's talk about the hug itself first, because what happens in those few seconds is more layered than most men realize. A hug is not just physical contact. It's a small test, not a conscious one. She's not standing there with a checklist, but her nervous system is picking up information. How does he hold himself? Does he pull me in with intention? Or does it feel like he's just going through the motion? Does he let go at the right time, or does it get weird? And most importantly, what does he do in the 2 or 3 seconds right after? Picture this. You've had a good conversation with a woman. There's been some real back and forth, the kind where you lose track of time a little, and at some point it's time to leave, or she's heading somewhere, and she steps in to hug you. It's warm, maybe a second longer than a casual hug. You can feel that something is there, and then it ends. And here's where most men get it wrong. They talk, immediately. All right, well, it was really good to see you. Or they laugh at nothing. Or they take out their phone. Or, and this one is so common, they say something that tries to make plans right there on the spot, like they're suddenly afraid the moment is going to slip away. And it does slip away. But not for the reason they think. It slips away because they filled it. That moment right after a hug, when she's still close, when the warmth is still there, when neither of you has fully stepped back into normal mode, that moment has a feeling to it, a quiet kind of electricity, and it only exists for a few seconds before the world comes back in. When you rush to fill it, you're not protecting it, you're erasing it. What to do instead is almost uncomfortable in how simple it is. You just let it be there for a second. You don't stare at her intensely. You don't try to make it a movie moment. You just don't immediately grab for the next thing. Maybe a small smile. Maybe you hold eye contact for just a beat longer than normal. Nothing performed, just present. That's it. And I know that sounds almost too small to matter. But here's the thing. She's going to go home later, or get in her car, or sit down somewhere quiet, and that moment is going to come back to her. Not the conversation, not the jokes, not anything you planned. That 3-second pause where you didn't flinch. That's what comes back. Because it felt different. It felt like someone who wasn't anxious about her. Someone who could hold the moment without needing to escape it. And that feeling has a name in her mind, even if she never says it out loud. It feels like confidence. Real confidence. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that's actually harder to find. Now, there's a second layer to this that goes a little deeper. It's not just about what happens right after the hug. It's about the hours after, the day after. Because most men, even the ones who handle the moment well, tend to undo it almost immediately. They text too fast. She gets home, or she's back at her desk, and her phone buzzes. And it's him. Already. Hey, really great seeing you today. And look, on the surface, that seems fine. It seems considerate. But what it actually communicates underneath is that he's been sitting with it. That the moment meant something to him, and he needed her to know that right away. And that's not necessarily bad, but it shifts something. It moves the energy in a direction that puts her in a passive position. Now she has to respond. Now she has to decide how warm to be, how much to give back, whether to match his energy or pull back a little. It creates low-level pressure where there was just ease before. What to do instead is to let it sit. Let the moment be its own thing for a while. Let her carry it around without immediately converting it into a text conversation. Because here's what happens when you don't rush it. She starts to wonder. Not in an anxious way, in a curious way. She thinks about the conversation. She thinks about that pause. She maybe checks her phone and notices you haven't texted and feels something she doesn't quite have a word for. A small pull toward you rather than away. That's not manipulation. That's just understanding how space works, how presence works. And most men are so afraid of that space that they never let it do anything. There's a third thing, and this one is the one most men never think about at all. It's not about the hug. It's not about the silence after. It's about who you are when she's not watching. Stay with me here, because this is where it gets real. Women pick up on something that's almost impossible to fake over time. It's not your looks. It's not how smooth you are in the moment. It's whether the version of you she sees matches the version that exists when no one's looking. And I know that sounds abstract, so let me make it concrete. Picture a different scene. Same man, same woman. A few weeks have passed since that hug, since that quiet moment. They've talked a few times, nothing heavy, just easy back and forth. And one evening she mentioned something, casually, almost offhand, about a book she's been meaning to read, or a place she wants to visit someday. Something small. Most men hear that and file it away, or don't even register it. But a few weeks later, this man mentions it. Not in a, "Hey, I remembered what you said," kind of way that draws attention to itself, just naturally, like it was a normal thing to hold on to, like she was worth paying attention to. And something shifts in her. Not because it was a grand gesture, not because he planned it, but because it told her something about him that he never said out loud. It told her that she wasn't just background noise to him, that when she spoke, it actually landed somewhere. That feeling of being genuinely heard, genuinely seen, is rarer than most people admit. And when a woman feels it from a man, it doesn't just make her like him more, it makes her trust something about him, something quiet and deep that's hard to shake. This is where things change, because most men are so focused on being impressive that they forget to be attentive. They're thinking about what to say next instead of actually listening to what's being said right now. And she can feel that. Not always consciously, but it shows up as a vague sense that he's performing rather than connecting. And here's the emotional truth underneath all of this. Women don't fall for men who need them to validate every move. They fall for men who seem to have an interior life that exists independently of her reaction. A man who is calm after the hug because he's calm in general. A man who doesn't text immediately because he has things going on, things that matter to him, a life that's already full. A man who remembers what she said because he's genuinely curious about people, not because he was running some retention strategy. That's the version of you that stays in her mind. Not the version who performed well for 20 minutes. The version who seemed real, grounded, like there was more underneath than what he was showing. I want you to think about a man you've known, or maybe you've been this man at some point, who was completely undone by a woman's attention, who rearranged himself around her moods, who was exciting when she was warm and anxious when she was distant, who needed constant feedback to know where he stood. It's exhausting to be around, and it's even more exhausting to be. And the hard truth is that most men operate this way without realizing it, not out of weakness, out of caring too much, too fast, in a way that hasn't found its footing yet. The shift isn't about caring less. It's about having somewhere to stand that doesn't depend on her response. Because when you have that, when you're genuinely okay whether the text comes back in 5 minutes or 5 hours, when the hug was good and you can let it be good without immediately needing more, something in your whole presence changes. The way you hold yourself, the way you speak, the way you leave a room. And she feels that before she can explain it. She might not even tell her friends about anything specific. It'll just be, "There's something about him." That vague, slightly frustrating thing women say that men can never quite decode. But you'll know what it is. It's the absence of need. Not coldness, not distance. Just a man who is already whole and is choosing to let her in because he wants to, not because he's desperate for her to fill something missing. That's what lingers. That's what she thinks about in the quiet moments. Not the hug, not the line you said, not the thing you planned. The feeling that you were already okay before she got there. So let's bring it back to where we started. She hugs you. And then what? Most men think the answer is somewhere out there, some perfect thing to say, some move to make, some way to lock in the moment before it slips away. But the real answer is almost the opposite of that. The man who stays in her mind isn't the one who did the most. He's the one who needed the least, who was present without being grabby about it, who let the moment be what it was without immediately trying to own it, or extend it, or turn it into something that would reassure him. And that's not something you can fake for long. It has to come from somewhere real. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. Everything we talked about today, the pause after the hug, the space before the text, the quiet act of actually listening, none of it is a technique. Not really. It's what naturally happens when a man is genuinely comfortable in himself, when he's not running on anxiety or approval seeking or the low hum of insecurity that most of us carry around without even noticing it. The men who are magnetic to women aren't magnetic because they learned the right moves. They're magnetic because they did the inner work, quietly, without making a big deal of it, until the outer stuff started taking care of itself. That's the reframe I want to leave you with. Stop thinking about what to do after the hug. Start thinking about who you are before it even happens. The version of you that walks into a room already settled, already whole, not performing confidence, just having it. Because there's nowhere else you'd rather be, and nothing you urgently need from anyone. That man doesn't have to think about the pause. He just pauses naturally. He doesn't have to calculate the text. He just doesn't feel the rush. He doesn't have to try to be remembered. He just is. And she feels that. Every time. Now, here's the thing about everything you just heard. Most men will listen to this and nod along and think, yeah, that makes sense. And then they'll go back to doing exactly what they were doing before. Not because they don't care, but because old patterns are comfortable, and real change takes something more than just understanding an idea. A few men, though, and I mean genuinely just a few, will hear this and let it actually land somewhere. Will sit with it. Will start noticing the moments in their own life where they're filling space that didn't need to be filled, where they're reaching for reassurance they don't actually need. And they'll start slowly to let that go. Those are the men who change, not dramatically, just quietly, steadily, in a direction that makes everything else easier. If that's you, if something in this video felt less like new information and more like something you already knew but hadn't quite put into words yet, then stick around, because that's exactly what this channel is about. Not tricks, not scripts, just the real psychology underneath why some men are remembered and most are forgotten. Subscribe if that's what you're here for. There's more where this came from. And if there's someone in your life right now, someone you're trying to figure out, someone whose signals feel mixed, someone you want to understand better, drop it in the comments. No judgment, just real conversation. Because the men who are willing to ask the honest questions are usually the ones who find the real answers.